Hi Aries, welcome to your July horoscope reading. I've already shuffled the cards, laid them down, and read them pretty much, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you know what I saw. I'm getting this sense from this spread that you're really trying, or going to be trying really hard in the month of July to be good, right? To be your best and to live up to your own ideals, but also there's an element of your motivation coming from sort of outside of yourself a little bit, another person or the influence of some other people. But with that, there's also this other side of another influence that's leading you, the way you don't want to go, of course. And you're keeping yourself sort of separate from that. And it's making you seem a little bit rigid, a little more rigid than normal, maybe. But you have sort of an objective, and then also an objective viewpoint towards it. You know what I mean? You're dedicated. You're dedicated, and you're trying to build something stable, and you're trying to fulfill somebody else's ideals that sort of match up with your own, if that makes any sense. There's a motivation coming from somewhere outside of yourself, maybe something having to do with a family member or something like that. But it's congruent with what you want for yourself and how you see yourself and feel that you can be as your best self, right? And you're working really hard to achieve that, and you're creating a lot of structure in your life around that, trying to figure that out, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pick these up and reshuffle and do another little spread to give you some advice on that, and I'll be right back. Okay, Aries, so as far as advice goes, what I'm seeing here, down here are the cards that are sort of the energy that the cards don't want you to embody, right? And this is the energy that it does want you to embody. There's definitely a color split between these, definitely cool versus sort of warm. And what this whole entire thing is kind of telling me is that they're asking you to put a little bit less stock and give less credit to and less blame upon your environment, and to really do some introspection, right? To really look at everything, kind of the way it is, not just constantly like looking at your environment and being like, well, that's the reason this is happening, because you do have like a place in that, right? And somewhere you're already aware is kind of what I'm getting. It's just to kind of keep reminding yourself of that. And then the second half of that is also, once you do that, you're able to give yourself more credit and to have a little bit more control, right? Realize that when you're behaving the way you want to behave, that's you, right? That's not necessarily your environment. I'm a little bit wary to give people that advice because, I'm not going to say don't heed your environment, right? Because I know that a lot of the time environment can have a lot to do with it, to do with things, to do with your behavior, your patterns and stuff like that. So I'm not going to say completely ignore your environment, but this is telling me that you need to shift your focus a little bit more towards towards a more sustainable thought sort of process about it, if that makes any sense. Because it's chalking everything up to your environment is not that sustainable, you know what I mean? As in, like, you can't just, it makes sense to kind of be aware of those things and be wary of those things, right? When you're trying to do what you want to do, and it's sort of in opposition to that. But eventually you're going to be in those situations to some degree, you know what I mean? So it's good to kind of get into the mindset of like, how can you give yourself more credit, and then also put more, I don't want to say more of the blame on yourself, but just look at your own behavior and try to make your behavior a little more stable, despite what's kind of going on around you, if that makes any sense. And I'm getting from this that you kind of know that. You sort of have an idea. You're not starting from scratch, right? This is a continuation of something that's been happening. You've been in this place of like having to watch what you're doing, who you're with, where you're going, and that kind of thing. And now you're kind of coming into this place where you're like, you're a little bit more aware of your strengths for one, but also your place within sort of the whole in the situation, right? Yeah, but I'm definitely seeing that that's an aspect of it, is giving yourself credit as well, right? Because if you chalk everything up to, as I said, if you chalk everything up to just your environment, then nothing's up to you. You don't get any credit for that. You know what I mean? Like, put in the work, get the credit kind of deal. And there's a vigilance to it. There's definitely a lot of insight happening, a lot of structure happening, a lot of control, not control necessarily, but like, let's see. Yeah, it's a structural kind of energy that you need to kind of adopt for yourself, so that when you go out into these situations, that you're ready, you're steady within yourself, right? And that's how you become kind of the person that you want to be, right? It's not by controlling. I'm going to say it again and again and again, but not by controlling your environment, but by controlling yourself within those environments. And again, I'm not saying completely, because I know that's a very dangerous thing to say, of course, but not to completely, disregard the effect that your environment has on you, but to shift your attitude a little bit this month more towards introspection into yourself and looking at your own behaviors, even without that environment, right? Because you can take yourself out of the environment and you may be behaving a little bit differently, but you're still the same person who's going to be behaving the same way within that environment. You know what I mean? Unless you truly change yourself and learn to have strength of self within those different environments where you feel that you have a little less control. Wow. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Hopefully that made sense. I just kind of went off on a tangent. Yeah, hopefully that made sense, Aries. Yeah, cool. Right on. Goodbye. Dive into my spot.